The gavel hangs in the air. For 1 second, nothing moves. A field stretches out under a sky the color of rustgrass, bending in a wind that never stops. Somewhere at the far edge of it, a house leans like it's already decided to fall, and hasn't yet, only because no one has told it it's allowed to. Inside a courthouse room that smells like dust and old paper, a hand goes up before it's told to. $7. A number too small to mean anything, except tonight it will. Because somewhere under that leaning barn, something has been waiting 20 years to be found. Somewhere on a muddy road 2,000 acres wide, a man is about to notice a name he thought was buried for good. The wind picks up. The gavel starts to fall. The gavel came down. $7. That was it. That was all it took to own 80 acres. Nobody wanted a house the old men in town called the Coffin, and a name I didn't even know how to carry yet. I was 19. I had $11 left in my pocket, and I was standing in a Montana auction room that smelled like dust and forgotten paperwork, staring at a piece of land that used to belong to a woman I never met. But I should start earlier, because none of this makes sense if you don't know where I came from. Because you have to understand what it feels like to be nobody's daughter. I grew up in a place called Restwood Group Home. Cinder block walls, steel bunks, oatmeal that came out of a bag and tasted like wet paper no matter how much sugar you dumped on it. I ate that oatmeal for 11 years. Same table, same window, same view of a parking lot where cars came and took other kids home. Not me, never me. I was the kind of kid who aged out of hope before I aged out of the system. Everyone knew it. Nobody said it, which was almost worse. The woman who ran Restwood was named Ms. Renwick. Tired eyes, tired voice. 23 years of watching kids get picked and not picked and picked again. She called me into her office on a Tuesday in October. "Fern," she said, and her voice had that particular softness. The one that meant something was ending. I walked down that hallway one last time, past the bulletin board, past the rec room where a TV played to nobody, past the window where I used to press my forehead against the glass and watch the cars. In her office, she handed me a cardboard box, small enough to hold in one hand. "These were your mother's things," she said. "We kept them in storage. You're old enough now." 19 years old. And this box was the entire inheritance of a woman who gave birth to me. "Is there anything else?" I asked. "Any family? Anyone?" She shook her head. "Your mother died in a car accident when you were 4. No father on record, no relatives listed. I'm sorry, Fern." She handed me an envelope. $200, state exit allowance. "Good luck," she said. That was it. That was goodbye. I opened the box that night in a bus station in Cheyenne. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A janitor mopping the same 6 feet of floor over and over like it might change something. Inside the box, 3 things. A silver ring, tarnished black. Initials MD scratched on the inside band. A birth certificate. Mother Marisol Duskin. Father unknown. Place of birth, Fallow Ridge, Montana. And a photograph. A young woman standing in front of a white farmhouse, one hand shading her eyes from the sun, smiling like she was daring the camera to catch something she wasn't ready to give. Behind her, fields stretching to a horizon that didn't seem to end. On the back, in careful handwriting, Grandma's place. Fallow Ridge, Montana. I stared at that photograph until the bus station lights blurred. I had her eyes, dark, almost black. I had her chin, stubborn. Ms. Renwick used to call it my difficult face. But I didn't have her smile. I didn't have whatever let her stand in the sun like the world owed her something good. I had nothing, except now I had a place. And a place was enough to start walking toward. The next 2 years I don't like talking about. Not because they were the worst thing that ever happened to anyone. I've heard worse. Girls who ended up on corners. Boys who ended up in cells. I was lucky, which is a strange word to use for what came next. I washed dishes at a diner outside Laramie until the owner's nephew followed me into the walk-in freezer, and I had to leave through the back door and never come back for my last paycheck. I picked cherries near Missoula until the season ended, and they didn't need me anymore. I slept in libraries, in bus stations, behind a laundromat one November curled against the warm exhaust vent and woke up with frost in my eyelashes. But every library, every computer with internet access. I searched Fallow Ridge, Montana, Duskin family, nothing, nothing, nothing. Until 18 months later in a public library in Billings, I found everything. County property records, digitized, buried in a database nobody ever opened. And there she was, Odessa Duskin, 80 acres, Section 11, one farmhouse, one barn, property acquired in 1958. My great-grandmother. She died 6 years before I started looking. The farm sat abandoned, taxes unpaid, estimated debt $1,100, and at the bottom a single line that made my whole chest go still. Property scheduled for county auction. Date October 14th. I looked at the calendar clock in the corner of the screen. It was October 11th. I hitchhiked with a feed truck driver, a man who didn't ask questions, which I appreciated more than he'll ever know. He dropped me at a crossroads and pointed. "Town's that way," he said. "What's left of it?" Fallow Ridge looked like a place slowly forgetting it existed. 6 buildings on Main Street, 3 of them boarded shut. A feed store on one end, a diner on the other, smoke curling from its chimney like it was the only proof the town still had a pulse. The county clerk's office doubled as the post office. A woman named Wanda Rook barely looked up from her desk. "Auction's tomorrow," she said. 10 o'clock, courthouse. "I know, I'm going." She studied me. Backpack held together with duct tape. Clothes that had seen too many laundromat dryers and not enough of them. "That Duskin place has been sitting empty 6 years," she said. "Roof's half gone, pipes burst. Nobody's touched it since the old woman died." "I know. Take more than $7 to make that place livable." I didn't know yet how right she was. "Your funeral," Wanda said, and went back to her paperwork like she hadn't just said something that would follow me for months. The auction room smelled like dust and old wood and men's aftershave that hadn't been reapplied since church that morning. 6 people, all old enough to be my grandparents. A man in a rumpled suit read from a clipboard and a voice flat as a held breath. 3 properties went first. Fast, board bids, $50 here, $100 there. Then he got to the last one. "Duskin property," he read. 80 acres, farmhouse, barn, condition as is. Minimum bid, $7. Silence. A fly hit the window and hit it again. $7, he said. "Anyone?" I raised my hand before I decided to. $7. A few heads turned. I saw the look. Amusement. Pity. The kind reserved for kids who don't know any better yet. Going once, the clock ticked. Going twice, the gavel came down. Sold. I walked to the front and signed my name with a hand that wouldn't stay still. Fern Duskin. The clerk handed me a set of keys, so rusted they looked like they might dissolve. "Congratulations," he said without an ounce of warmth in it. 90 days to pay $1,100 in back taxes. Miss that, county takes it back. 90 days, $1,100. I had $11 and a photograph of a woman I barely remembered. But I had land. I had a name. Somewhere out there, someone in my family had once stood in the sun and smiled like she meant it. For the first time in my life, I belonged somewhere, even if that somewhere was falling down around itself. The walk to the farm took 2 hours. Pavement turned to gravel. Gravel turned to dirt. Fields gone wild on either side, brown grass moving in waves like something breathing under a blanket. I grew up around buildings, fences, walls that told you exactly how far you were allowed to see. Here there was nothing between me and the edge of the world. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of something with no bottom. The house came into view first, white paint peeling in long curls, porch sagging on one side, missing a post entirely. Upstairs windows, dark and empty glass, long gone. And the roof, a whole corner of it caved in, exposing the attic to open sky like a wound that never closed. Behind the house, a barn leaning at an angle that looked physically impossible, like it was holding its breath waiting to fall the second I turned my back. I stood at the edge of the property for a long time, long enough that the wind pushed against my back like a hand, guiding me forward or warning me off. I couldn't tell which. I thought about turning around, selling the keys to somebody, walking back into town and finding another diner, another orchard, another vent behind another laundromat. But I'd already tried that life, and I knew exactly where it led. Nowhere. So I walked toward the house instead. The front door wasn't even locked, didn't need to be. The frame had warped so badly there was a gap wide enough for raccoons to walk through standing up, and they had. The smell hit first, mildew, rot, that sweet sour stench that means a place has been abandoned so long it stopped waiting for anyone. I stepped inside anyway. The living room might have been beautiful once. High ceilings, a stone fireplace, plaster hanging off the walls now in long gray sheets like something molting. I tested each floorboard before trusting my weight to it. Kitchen, counters crumbling, sink hanging by one bolt. Bedroom, a mattress reduced to rusted springs. But underneath all of it, the bones were good. I said that out loud just to hear something besides the wind. The bones are good. My voice sounded small in that house, hopeful, almost stupid. I kept walking. In a back room, I found the first sign that somebody had actually lived here. Not just existed, lived. A bookshelf still standing still, holding books. A rocking chair by the window cushion, chewed through but the frame solid. And on the wall, photographs. I stepped closer, careful, like they might crumble if I breathed wrong. A man in overalls beside a tractor. A woman in a flowered dress holding a baby. Two kids running toward the camera, mouths open, laughing at something the photograph couldn't keep. And one photograph in a small silver frame set apart from all the others. A young woman standing in front of this exact house, one hand shading her eyes from the sun. My mother. I reached out and touched the glass. Cool. Real. She had stood in this room. She had looked at this same photograph. She had been here. I sat down on the floor of a stranger's house and cried until there was nothing left in me to cry with. That night, I slept in an old pickup parked behind the house, rust eating through the wheel wells, seats cracked but dry. When I curled up with my jacket for a blanket and my backpack for a pillow, it felt safer than anything I'd known in years. The cold woke me before dawn. October in Montana doesn't wait for you to be ready for it. My breath came out in clouds inside the cab. My fingers wouldn't bend right. When I finally got the door open and stepped outside, the frost crunched under my boots like broken glass. But the sky, pink and orange, bleeding up from the horizon like something on fire that didn't want to be put out. I stood there, forgetting the cold for 1 second, forgetting the $1,100 I didn't have, forgetting the 90 days already ticking down. I just watched the sun come up on my land. My land. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like a language I was only starting to learn. I said them again anyway. My land. I went back into the house as soon as there was enough light to see by. I needed to understand what I was actually dealing with, and I needed to find the hatch. Because the night before, huddled in that truck, I'd finally unfolded a letter I found tucked in my mother's box. Paper so old the creases had almost worn through. Handwriting I didn't recognize. My dearest Marisol, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I pray every day that you will. But if you don't, I want you to know something. I forgive you. Whatever happened that night, whatever made you run, it doesn't matter to me anymore. You are my granddaughter. You are my blood. And I love you. If you ever come home, look under the barn, your grandfather's hiding place. He built it during the war when he thought the world might end. I've kept it up. Everything you need to start over is there. Come home, Marisol. Please come home. All my love. Grandma Odessa. The letter had no date on it, but it had been in my mother's things when she died, which meant she carried it for years, never threw it away. Maybe she meant to come back. Maybe she tried. Maybe she spent her whole short life circling this place in her mind and never found the courage to walk through the front door. I would never know. But I could find the hiding place. The barn was worse than the house, leaning so hard I was afraid to breathe near it. Half the roof collapsed into a mountain of debris. The smell of old hay and rot burned my eyes. But the floor, still there, warped filthy but solid when I tested it. I started in the corner farthest from the collapse, feeling along the seams, looking for a hinge, anything. It took 2 hours. The hatch was in the second stall, buried under dirt and old hay so thick it looked like part of the ground. I found it when my boot caught on something metal I thought was broken equipment. I pulled. It was heavy. My arms burned, but it came up. Wooden stairs descending into dark. I used my phone for light. Battery nearly dead. Didn't matter. The room below was small, 8 feet by 8 feet. Shelves lined with supplies. Canned food, some of it probably still good. Tools wrapped in oiled cloth. Seeds in sealed jars. And on a small table against the far wall, a metal box. My hands wouldn't stop shaking when I opened it. Inside, $900 in cash, bundled with rubber bands that crumbled the second I touched them. A leather journal pages yellowed soft with age. Letters, dozens of them, each in its own envelope, each addressed to Marisol Duskin, each stamped return to sender, and under the letters tied together with a faded ribbon. Birthday cards, one for every year since I was born. I opened the first one. Paper pink edges, hand-drawn with little flowers. Happy 5th birthday, my dearest Fern. I don't know where you are. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I made you a card anyway. Because somewhere in the world you're turning 5 today. And I want you to know somebody is thinking of you. Your great-grandmother Odessa. I opened the next one, and the next. Year after year. A woman writing birthday wishes to a child she had never met. Small updates tucked inside each one. About the weather. About a cat she'd adopted and named Hope. About the fields turning green in spring. The last card was dated 3 months before she died. Handwriting shaky, barely legible. Happy 19th birthday, Fern. You're a woman now, old enough to find your way home if you ever choose to look for it. I've left everything for you. The money, the letters, the land. It's all waiting. I don't have much time left, but I'll hold on as long as I can. I love you. I've always loved you. Grandma Odessa. She died 11 days after writing those words. She held on as long as a body can hold on, but I hadn't come in time. I pressed that card to my chest and cried until I couldn't breathe right. The letters to my mother spanned almost 20 years. Odessa had written faithfully, one every few months, starting the year Marisol would have turned 17 and ending 3 days before she died. Each one began the same way. My dearest Marisol. Each one ended the same way. Come home. Please come home. In between, small ordinary things. Weather, neighbors, the way the fields looked in spring when the wildflowers came up along the fence line. But some of the letters weren't ordinary at all. She wrote about the searching. Letters sent to every address she could find. Phone calls that went nowhere. Money spent on a private investigator who took her savings and turned up nothing. She wrote about waiting. That was the part that broke something loose in me. Page after page of waiting. Watching the road, checking the mailbox, lying awake listening for footsteps that never came. I keep your room ready, she wrote in one letter. The quilt your mother made is still on the bed. Everything is here, Marisol. Everything is waiting. She never knew about me. Never knew her granddaughter had gotten pregnant, had given birth, had named a daughter after a woman she'd probably never even met. She never knew I existed, but she left everything she had just in case, just in hope. If you've made it this far, I need to ask you something. If you were standing where I was standing that day, 19 years old, alone in an underground room holding $900 and a stack of letters from a woman who died waiting for someone who was never coming, what would you do? Would you take the money and run, find something easier? Let the county take back this broken place and disappear into some other town where nobody expected anything from you? Or would you stay? I want you to hold that question because I did. I sat in that dirt floor room for a long time, long enough that my legs went numb from the cold coming up through the ground. And that's when I found it. Tucked inside the last birthday card, a folded scrap of paper separate from everything else. Newer paper. Odessa's handwriting, but different somehow. Faster. Less careful. Like she wrote it in a hurry or wrote it afraid. I unfolded it. There is something I never told anyone it read. Something about the night Marisol left. I always believed she ran because she was ashamed, because she was young and scared and made a mistake she couldn't face. But before I die, I need someone to know the truth. She didn't run from shame. Someone made her leave. I have spent 20 years blaming a 17-year-old girl for something that was never her fault. If you are reading this and you have come home, please, find out what really happened that night, for her sake and for yours. I sat there in the dark with that scrap of paper in my hands, and the cold coming up through the floor didn't matter anymore. Someone made her leave. My mother hadn't run away from her family. Somebody ran her out. And whoever that was, they were still out there. Maybe still in this town. Maybe someone I'd already walked past on Main Street without knowing it. I climbed up out of that hidden room slower than I climbed down into it. Every step felt heavier, like the ground itself had shifted under everything I thought I understood about my own family. I stood in the barn doorway and looked out at the fields. Gold light spreading low across the grass. A hawk circling somewhere above the tree line, like it had all the time in the world and nowhere it needed to be. I thought about walking back into town right then, marching up to Wanda Rook's desk and asking her flat out who would have wanted a 17-year-old girl gone badly enough to make it happen. But I didn't have proof. I didn't even have a name. I had a scrap of paper and a feeling in my chest like something was finally starting to make sense, even if I couldn't see the shape of it yet. So instead, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I went back inside the house. I stood in the middle of what used to be a garden, 90 days on the clock, $11 in my pocket, and a broken house holding secrets that were older than me. And I said it out loud. To nobody. To the wind. To whatever was left of my mother in that place. I'm staying because someone had waited 20 years for the truth to come home. And I wasn't going anywhere until I found it. The feed store smelled like leather and grain dust and something underneath that I couldn't name yet. Something like kindness that hadn't decided if it trusted me. I walked those aisles 3 days in a row, looking at tarps I couldn't afford, nails I couldn't afford, rope I couldn't afford. The basic language of survival, and I didn't speak it. Not with $11, not with a roof that had a hole in it the size of a truck bed. On the fourth day, a voice stopped me at the end of the aisle. "You're the girl who bought the Duskin place." I turned. A woman behind the counter, 71, maybe older, white hair cropped short, hands like tree bark. "Yes, ma'am." "You knew Odessa Duskin." "She was my great-grandmother." The woman studied me, didn't blink, didn't smile either. "You look like her," she said finally. "Around the jaw, that stubborn set to it." I didn't know what to say to that. "I'm Opal," she said. "Opal Winters. I knew Odessa 60 years. She used to come in here every Thursday, buy her supplies, stay to talk longer than either of us had time for." She paused. "She talked about your mother every single week, right up until she couldn't drive out here anymore." Something in my chest pulled tight. "She never stopped believing Marisol would come back," Opal said. "Not once, 20 years, and she never stopped." "She died before I found this place," I said. "Before any of us knew about each other." Opal was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached under the counter and pulled out a scrap of paper, started writing something on it. "I've got damaged inventory in back," she said. "Tarps with holes, nails that got wet and rusted through. Not worth selling. Still usable if you don't mind imperfect." "I can't pay for it." "I didn't ask you to pay for it." Her voice went gruff. "I asked if you could use it." Something loosened in my chest. First kindness I'd been handed in longer than I wanted to admit. "Yes," I said. "I could use it." That was how I met Caden. He worked for Opal, part-time, she said. But he was there every day I came in after that. 23 years old, dark hair, darker eyes, a face that didn't give anything away for free. First time I saw him, he was hauling feed bags off a delivery truck. Looked at me once, nodded, went back to work. Second time I was fighting a roll of tarp into the bed of Odessa's old pickup, my arms shaking, the plastic winning. He appeared beside me without a word, grabbed one end, waited for me to grab the other. We loaded it in silence. Thanks, I said. He nodded. That was the whole conversation. But over the weeks that followed, he started showing up at the farm. Not to talk, just to work. Mornings mostly. A few hours patching the roof, reinforcing a wall before he disappeared again before dark. Why do you keep coming? I asked him. Maybe the 10th time. He shrugged. Opal sent me. I found out later that was only half true. Your great-grandmother helped my mother once, he said finally on the 11th time I asked. She was a midwife. Delivered me when the roads were too icy to get to a hospital. My mother would have died without her. He looked up at the roof line, at the patches we'd already made and the ones still waiting. Debts don't disappear, he said, just because the people who are owed them do. The third person who helped me was Sheila Pruitt, 52 years old, ran the only diner left in Fallow Ridge. 6 booths, a counter, a kitchen that hadn't been updated since disco was still a word people used unironically. She hired me to wash dishes, 3 nights a week, cash, no questions. Odessa used to come in every Sunday after church. She told me once over the hiss of the dish sprayer. Same booth, same order, coffee, apple pie, whatever gossip she'd collected that week. She smiled at the memory and it aged her 10 years and took 10 years off her at the same time. She talked about your mother constantly, Sheila said. Showed me pictures, told me stories. She was so sure Marisol would come back someday. She looked at me. Guess she was right, just not the way she thought. I worked that dish pit for months, hands cracked from the hot water, back aching from bending over the sprayer, eating whatever Sheila couldn't sell, which some nights was the only food I had. It wasn't glamorous, it was survival. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice it happening. The roof stopped leaking, mostly. The walls stopped whistling every time the wind picked up. I had a wood stove salvaged from a barn 20 miles out, its chimney pipe, held together with wire and something close to prayer. I had blisters on top of blisters. I had, for the first time in my entire life, something that was starting to look like a home. And I had made an enemy. His name was Desmond Kessler. He owned the biggest ranch in the county, 2,000 acres straddling the river. Cattle, wheat, half the town on his payroll, which meant half the town owed him something they couldn't always name out loud. He showed up on a morning in November, right after the first real cold had settled in, wearing boots too clean for a working ranch and a smile that didn't come anywhere near his eyes. Miss Duskin, he said, like my name was something he'd scraped off his boot. Mr. Kessler, I wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood. Thank you. And I wanted to make you an offer. He held out a folded paper. I didn't take it. $4,000 for the property, he said. As is, you could be gone by the end of the week. It's not for sale. Everything's for sale, sweetheart. His smile widened, and it made my skin crawl in a way I couldn't fully explain yet. Just a matter of price. Not this time. You're young, he said. You don't understand how things work out here. This land is isolated, expensive to keep up. You'll burn through whatever you've got by spring. And then what? Then I'll figure it out. Like your great-grandmother did. His smile vanished quick as a light switch. She was a stubborn old woman. Refused every offer I made her. Sat out here alone for years watching the place fall down around her ears. She kept it in the family 60 years, I said. I plan on doing the same. His jaw tightened. You've got 90 days, he said, and change to pay off those taxes. Miss the deadline, the county takes it, and I'll be right there to buy it out from under you. Then I guess I better not miss the deadline. He stared at me a long moment, pale gray eyes like ice sitting on top of water that hadn't decided yet if it wanted to freeze all the way through. Then he turned. walked back to his truck. Your grandmother used to say the same thing, he called over his shoulder. Stubborn, just like her. We'll see how that works out for you. I watched him go, and something in the back of my mind, something that had been sitting quiet since I found that scrap of paper in the hidden room. It sat up straight and started paying attention. Because he hadn't just threatened me, he'd said it like he already knew how the story ended. Like he'd seen this exact scene play out before. December came in hard, temperature dropping to 20 below some nights, wind finding every crack I hadn't patched yet, and there were still plenty of those. I woke up one morning with frost on the inside of my blankets. I kept working anyway. Opal brought supplies when she could. Beans, rice, canned vegetables I heated on the wood stove until the whole house smelled like something almost like a kitchen. Caden came when the weather let him, taught me how to read the grain of a board before I cut it, how to square a corner, how to make a repair that would actually hold instead of just looking like it would. I learned he'd studied construction for 2 years at a community college in Billings before coming home to take care of his mother when she got sick. I learned he knew this land better than anyone alive, could predict a storm hours before the sky gave any sign of it, could find water and shelter in stretches of country that looked to me like nothing but empty. I learned he didn't smile much, but when he did, it changed his whole face, and I was starting to notice I liked being the reason for it, which was a problem I did not have room for, not with 90 days ticking down and a stranger's threat still ringing in my ears. So I didn't think about it, except I did, constantly. One afternoon, working the counter at Opal's restocking shelves that didn't need restocking, I finally asked the question that had been sitting in my throat for weeks. Opal, did you know my mother? Her hands stilled over the ledger she was working on. I knew of her, she said carefully. Everyone in this town knew of her. Odessa's granddaughter. Sweet girl. Quiet. Do you know why she left? Opal set her pen down. There were rumors, she said. Back then, about a lot of things. What kind of rumors? She looked at me for a long moment, something crossing her face that I couldn't name yet. Something careful. Something afraid. Ask me again sometime when I've had less coffee and more courage, she said and went back to her ledger. I didn't push, but I didn't forget either. The accident happened on a Thursday in the second week of December. Caden was helping me reinforce a beam in the barn. We both knew the structure was worse than it looked. One wrong shift of weight and the whole thing could come down around us. I heard the crack before I saw it. The beam splitting, the roof groaning like something waking up angry. Caden's shout right before he shoved me clear. He saved me, but the falling timber caught his shoulder, drove him down into the frozen dirt floor. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember running for the truck. I remember his face going gray with pain while I dug through splintered wood trying to get to him. His shoulder was dislocated, 2 ribs cracked. He'd be fine, the doctor at the clinic said. Eventually, with rest, weeks of it. Opal came to the hospital. She didn't yell. That was almost worse. I told you that place would hurt someone, she said, her voice flat, empty in a way I hadn't heard from her before. Opal, I'm sorry. Don't. She held up a hand. Caden is my responsibility. I never should have let him keep going out there. That's on me. She looked at me and I saw something new in her eyes. Blame. Stay away from him, she said. Stay away from both of us for a while. She left. Caden was moved to his mother's place in the next county to recover. He texted me once. I'm okay, don't worry, I'll be back when I can. But when he can wasn't now, and now was all I had. That same week, Desmond Kessler bought the building that housed Sheila's diner. Doubled the rent overnight. Sheila couldn't cover it. I'm sorry, honey, she told me, eyes wet. I can't afford to keep you on. I can barely afford to keep the lights running. The diner closed 2 weeks later. Sheila moved to Billings to live with her sister. And just like that, no Caden, no Opal, no Sheila, no job. Just me, a half-fixed house, and 20 days left on a deadline I didn't know how I'd meet. That was when Desmond came back. Last chance, he said, standing in my doorway like he already owned the frame around it. $6,000. More than you'll ever see anywhere else in your life. No, you're going to freeze out here. You know that, right? Then I'll freeze. He shook his head, almost admiring in the worst possible way. Stubborn, just like your grandmother. He left. And I sat in my empty house feeding the fire log by log and let myself wonder for the first time since I bought this land if he might actually be right. Christmas Eve, I came the closest I'd come to giving up. Temperature had fallen to 30 below, a storm rolling in that even I, city kid, group home kid, knew better than to underestimate. The kind of storm that closes roads, buries houses, takes people who get caught outside without meaning to. Wind screamed against the walls like it was looking for a way in personally. I sat by the wood stove rationing logs I'd spent weeks stacking, and the cold found its way in anyway. Every crack, every gap I thought I'd patched well enough. I thought about walking away. It would be so easy. Pack a bag, hike out to the main road, catch a ride somewhere warmer, somewhere I didn't have to fight for every single breath just to stay upright. I'd done it before. I could do it again. But something kept me in that chair, something I didn't understand until much later. I was tired of running. I had 80 acres of frozen ground and a house barely standing and a deadline I probably couldn't meet. But it was mine. First thing that had ever truly, legally, undeniably been mine, and I wasn't ready to hand it back. That's when I saw the lights. Through the gap in the curtains, headlights weaving wrong on the road that led up to my property. Too erratic, too slow then, too fast. At first I thought I was imagining it. Nobody drove in weather like this. Nobody sane. But the lights kept coming. Closer. Then they stopped hard right at the edge of my property, right where the road dipped into a gully that filled with snow every winter without fail. Stuck. I put on every layer I owned, wrapped a scarf around my face until only my eyes showed, grabbed the lantern, stepped out into weather that hit me like a wall. I couldn't feel my face within seconds. My eyes watered and froze at the same time. Every breath felt like swallowing a blade. I kept moving anyway. A small sedan, completely wrong for this kind of weather, slid into the ditch, rear wheels spinning uselessly against solid ice. Shapes inside. People. I banged on the window. A woman's face appeared. Dark hair, dark eyes. Terror written across every feature. I gestured for her to open the door. She did. "My children," she gasped. "Please, my children." In the back seat, two kids huddled under a single blanket. A boy, maybe 9. A girl younger, 5, maybe 6. The girl wasn't moving. I don't remember carrying her to the house. I remember the weight of her in my arms, light as something that shouldn't weigh anything at all. I remember the blue tint at the edges of her lips. I remember the mother stumbling behind me through snow, up to her knees, sobbing into the wind that swallowed the sound whole. I got them inside, slammed the door against the storm like I could physically hold it back with a piece of warped wood. And then everything became very simple. The girl was hypothermic. I'd read about it in Odessa's journal, in the parts where she wrote about her years as a midwife, about babies born in blizzards, farmers who fell through river ice, travelers who lost their way in storms like this one. Body temperature drops, heart slows down, the whole system shuts off piece by piece, trying to protect the parts that matter most. You couldn't warm them too fast. That was the part that mattered. Too fast and the cold blood rushes back to the heart all at once and stops it completely permanently. Slow, careful, patient. I wrapped her in blankets, set her near the stove but not too near. Got the mother into dry clothes, put hot water in her hands, told her to hold her daughter skin to skin. Share body heat the way every warm-blooded thing on this earth has done since before we had names for it. And I waited. The boy sat in the corner, silent, watching everything with eyes that had already seen too much for someone his age. The storm screamed outside. The girl didn't move. And then around 4 in the morning she cried. Weak, barely a sound at all. But her mother heard it and started crying too. clutching her daughter so tight I was afraid for one panic second that she'd stop the girl's breathing all over again just from love alone. "She's okay," I said, my voice shaking. "She's going to be okay." The mother looked at me like I'd handed her the entire world in one sentence. "You saved her," she said. "You saved my daughter." Her name was Renata Cruz, 36 years old, driving to a new job in a new town where nobody knew her name when the storm took the road out from under her. I didn't know what to say to what she just told me, so I just kept feeding the fire. I need to stop here for one moment, because what happened that night changed everything that came after it. Not just for me, for all of us. If you've ever opened your door when you didn't have to, if you've ever chosen to help a stranger when it would have been so much easier to just look away and keep the warmth for yourself, I need you to know it matters. It matters more than you will ever fully understand. Renata and her children stayed through the rest of that winter. At first it was practical. Her car was wrecked. The roads stayed closed for days. She had almost no money and nowhere else to be. But even after the roads cleared, even after I offered to drive her into Billings to catch a bus, she hesitated. "Where would we even go?" she asked, standing at the window, watching her son and daughter build something lopsided out of snow. They'd bounced back faster than I would have believed possible. Kids do that, bend instead of break in ways adults mostly forget how to. "The job I was heading toward isn't going to wait for me," she said. "I'd be starting over from nothing, again." She turned to look at me. "How much help do you actually need out here?" I laughed. It came out sharper than I meant it to. "More than I can afford to pay for." I wasn't asking about money. The arrangement worked itself out simply enough. Renata had worked as a bookkeeper before her life fell apart around her. She knew how to stretch a dollar further than it had any business going. I had land, space, a place where 3 people could sleep without paying a landlord for the privilege. Together, maybe we had a chance. Weeks passed. Caden's texts got longer, slowly, careful, like he was testing whether I still wanted to hear from him after everything that happened in that barn. I always answered. Opal stayed distant, and I let her because I understood something about guilt now that I hadn't understood before I bought this place. Guilt needs room to breathe before it can turn back into something softer. Then in late January, Opal showed up at my door unannounced, snow still on her boots, a casserole dish in her hands, like an offering or an apology or both. "I heard what you did," she said. "Christmas Eve. That family." Word travels. It's a small town. She looked past me into the house where Renata was feeding the kids at the table. Something in her face softened the way ice does right before it finally breaks apart in spring. Odessa would have done exactly the same thing, she said. Opened her door, saved whoever needed saving, no matter what it cost her. She handed me the casserole. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. "About this place. About what you're capable of." "Opal, let me finish." Her voice cracked just slightly right at the edge. "Caden's healing. He'll be fine. And when he's ready, he wants to come back. Help you finish what you started. If you'll have him." I didn't trust my own voice, so I just nodded. Opal reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. "This is from Odessa's account," she said. "She left it with me years ago, in case anyone from her family ever came home. I should have handed it over sooner. I wasn't sure yet if you'd stay." Inside the envelope, a check. $400. "She would have wanted you to have it," Opal said. "She would have wanted you to keep fighting." Between the $900 from the hidden room, Opal's $400, what was left of Sheila's last paycheck, and every dollar I'd scraped together washing dishes in a diner that didn't exist anymore, I finally had enough. I paid off the back taxes in full 2 days later. All $1,100 of it. Wanda Rook stamped my receipt with something that looked almost like surprise. "You're actually doing this," she said. "Not a question anymore. I've got help." She looked at me a long moment, then barely the corner of her mouth moved. "Your great-grandmother would be proud," she said. I walked out of that office into weak February sunlight and felt for the first time in my entire life like maybe I was going to be okay. That feeling lasted almost 3 weeks. Desmond's lawyer showed up on a Wednesday. Thin man in an expensive suit that had no business anywhere near my muddy road. He handed me a stack of papers with a smile that matched his boss's exactly. "You're being served notice," he said. "Mr. Kessler is asserting his legal right to the access road crossing his property line." I stared at the papers. "What does that mean?" "It means the road you use to reach this farm crosses a strip of land Mr. Kessler purchased some years back. As the legal owner, he has every right to restrict access to it." Restrict access. "Close the road, Miss Duskin." His smile widened and it made my stomach drop straight through the floor. "You'll still technically own the property. You simply won't be able to reach it." The next few days blurred together. I drove to the county records office and pulled every document I could get my hands on. Renata sat beside me, her bookkeeper's eyes scanning line after line for anything I might have missed. The lawyer hadn't lied. Desmond had purchased a narrow strip of land years ago, right where the main road crossed onto my property. Never built on it, never used it, just owned it, waiting. "Why now?" Renata asked. "If he wanted this land so badly, why sit on it this long?" I thought about it. About Odessa living out here alone for decades. About a road that had always stayed open, that everyone had always simply used without question. "Because my great-grandmother would have fought him," I said slowly. "She would have made noise, found lawyers, made his life difficult in every way she could manage. And you, I'm 19, no money, no connections." I looked out the window toward the fields, toward the barn, where Caden had nearly died protecting me. "I'm supposed to be easy," I said. Renata's jaw tightened sharp and sudden. "Are you?" she said. It wasn't really a question. I thought about the letter in the hidden room, the scrap of paper Odessa had hidden inside her own dying words. Someone made her leave. I thought about Desmond Kessler standing in my doorway twice now, telling me I'd end up just like my great-grandmother. Like he already knew exactly how that story went. Like maybe he'd been there for the ending the first time around. "No," I said finally. "I'm not easy." Caden came back in early March, his shoulders still stiff, still healing. But he could work again slowly, carefully, and he brought someone with him. An old man, 74, maybe older. Fishing hat pushed back on his head like he'd walked straight off a riverbank and hadn't bothered changing. "This is Walter," Caden said. "He used to practice law in Billings. 40 years, retired out here to fish and avoid people." Walter Pemberton looked me over slowly, the kind of look that catalogs a person instead of just seeing them. "Caden tells me you've got a problem with Desmond Kessler," he said. "I do." Something flickered behind his eyes. Old, sharp. Something that had been waiting a long time for a reason to wake back up. 30 years ago, he said, Kessler's father bought out a ranch that had been in one family for 5 generations, buried them in paperwork, legal tricks nobody could untangle in time. He sat down heavily on my porch step, favoring one knee. "The father of that family died of a heart attack a month later," Walter said. "The son moved away and never came back. You knew them. I was their lawyer." His voice went flat. "I tried to help. Kessler had more money than us, more time than us. He wore that family down to nothing piece by piece until there was nothing left to fight with." He looked up at me, something new in his eyes now. Something almost like hope sharpened into a point after 30 years of sitting unused. "I've been waiting 3 decades for a reason to look at that family again," he said. "You just handed me one." He took my case. For free. That night after Walter left, after Caden had gone quiet again in that way he did, when he was thinking too hard to talk, I sat in the barn where the hidden room still waited beneath the second stall. I climbed back down those wooden stairs one more time. I went through Odessa's journal page by page, slower this time, reading things I'd skimmed past before, in shock and grief, in too much of a hurry to understand what I was actually holding. And near the very back, tucked between 2 pages that had almost stuck together with age, a folded piece of paper I hadn't found before, newer than the rest. The handwriting rushed uneven like it had been written in a single sitting fast before courage could run out. I unfolded it with hands that had gone completely still. If you are reading this, it began, then you already found the first letter I left. The one where I told you someone made Marisol leave. I have a name now. I found it 3 years before I died. Too late to do anything with it myself. Too old. Too sick. Too afraid of what it might cost the people I still had left to protect. But you are young, and you are already fighting for this land the same way I did. So I am trusting you with what I could never bring myself to say out loud to another living soul. It was Desmond Kessler's father. He is the reason your mother ran. I felt the barn go very quiet around me. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. I read the rest of that page 3 times before the words fully settled into my chest. And when they finally did, I understood for the first time exactly what kind of fight I had actually walked into the day I raised my hand at that auction and said $7 like it was nothing. It was never just about the land. It never had been. Walter spread the documents across my kitchen table like a man laying out cards he'd been holding for 30 years. Here, he said, the original homestead claim, 1958, Odessa Duskin sole owner. Okay. Here, another paper. The easement registration for the access road, filed the same year, public right-of-way, never contested, not once, not by anyone, until now. Caden stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the road like Desmond might appear on it just from being talked about. And here, Walter's voice changed, went quieter, slower. This is the one that matters. A property transfer, dated, a name on it that made my stomach drop before my brain even finished reading it. Warwick Duskin, Walter said. Your great-great-uncle, Odessa's brother-in-law. He sold Kessler's father that strip of land, right where the road crosses onto your property. I never heard of him. Most people didn't. Walter tapped the page. He stayed on the family land into his 80s, sick by then, confused. How confused? Walter pulled a third document free from the stack. Diagnosed with dementia, he said, 2 years before he signed this. I sat down, because my legs decided that was a good idea before my brain got a vote. So the sale was fraudulent, Walter said. Almost certainly. Nobody challenged it at the time. Warwick died 3 months later. Nobody left who understood what happened. Nobody left who cared to look. Except somebody had cared. I thought of that scrap of paper hidden in the barn. Odessa's shaking handwriting. It was Desmond Kessler's father. He is the reason your mother ran. There's more, Walter said, and something in his voice made the room go very still. I pulled the county sheriff's log from that same year, found a complaint filed 3 weeks after the land sale. By who? Walter looked at me, really looked, like he was about to hand me something heavy and wanted to make sure I could carry it. A 17-year-old girl, he said, claiming she had proof that Kessler's father forged her great-uncle's signature. I couldn't breathe right. Her name, Walter said, was Marisol Duskin. The kitchen went silent except for the wood stove ticking as it cooled. The complaint was dismissed within 24 hours, Walter said. The sheriff at the time was Kessler's cousin. She tried, I whispered. She actually tried to fight this. And 3 weeks later, Walter said there's a second report. A 17-year-old girl seen boarding a bus out of town. Alone. Middle of the night. No luggage. No destination listed. I pressed my hand flat against the table like it might stop the room from tilting. My mother hadn't run because she was ashamed. She'd run because she was terrified. Because she had evidence that could have destroyed a powerful man's father, and that man had made sure she disappeared before she could use it. She spent the rest of her short life carrying that fear so far from Fallow Ridge that nobody ever traced it back. And she died never knowing it might have been safe to come home. Walter, my voice came out cracked. What do we do with this? He gathered the papers slowly, squared the edges like he was already imagining how they'd sit in front of a judge. We finished what your mother started, he said, except this time somebody's going to actually listen. The courtroom was small, wood paneling gone dull with age, a ceiling fan turning slow enough that it barely counted as moving air at all. Desmond sat on one side with two lawyers in suits that cost more than everything I own combined. I sat on the other with Walter in a blazer that had seen better decades, and Renata beside me for reasons that had nothing to do with legal strategy and everything to do with not letting me sit there alone. Caden stood at the back. Couldn't get time off work for the whole thing, but he'd shown up anyway, just to be in the room. The judge, a woman named Patricia Colford, had sharp eyes and a face that suggested she'd run out of patience for games sometime around 1998 and never gotten it back. Walter presented the homestead records, the easement, the fraud in the original transfer. Desmond's lawyers objected, argued, tried to bury the whole thing in confusion the way they'd buried a family 30 years before me. Walter wasn't finished. "Your Honor," he said, "we have one additional piece of evidence." He pulled out the sheriff's report, read the date out loud. 3 weeks after the fraudulent sale, he said, a 17-year-old girl filed a complaint alleging her great-uncle's signature had been forged. I watched Desmond's face. For the first time since I'd met him, something cracked behind his eyes. "The complaint was dismissed within a day," Walter continued. "The sheriff at the time was a cousin of the defendant's family." He turned, looked directly at the judge. "That girl's name was Marisol Duskin," he said. "The plaintiff's mother." The room went absolutely still. 3 weeks later, Walter said county records show a girl of the same age and description boarding a bus out of town in the middle of the night. Alone. No luggage. No stated destination. He set the paper down. "She never came back," he said, "because she was afraid of exactly what would happen if she stayed." I looked at Desmond. For the first time, I didn't see the man who'd stood in my doorway twice smiling like he already knew how my story ended. I saw someone smaller, someone carrying something he never asked to carry from a father who'd handed it to him without permission, the same way Odessa had handed me a farm and a set of letters without asking if I wanted the weight of them. "Your Honor," Walter said, "we request this evidence be referred to the district attorney, and we request the plaintiff's access road be restored with prejudice against any further claim." Judge Colford looked at Desmond for a long moment. "Motion granted," she said, "on both counts." The gavel came down. And somewhere I hope my mother finally knew the truth had made it home, even if she never had. Desmond didn't say anything as the room emptied. Didn't look at me. Just sat there staring at the table like it might rearrange itself into a different outcome if he waited long enough. I almost walked past him. Almost, but something stopped me halfway to the door. "Desmond." He looked up, older suddenly than I'd ever seen him look. "I didn't know," he said, quiet, almost like he was testing whether the words would even come out right. "About my father. About what he did to her. I believe you." "That doesn't fix anything." "No," I said, "it doesn't." I stood there a moment longer, because I had a decision to make, and I could feel it sitting in my chest like a stone I'd been carrying since the day I found that first hidden letter. I could destroy him. Walter had enough now to bury the Kessler name in this county for a generation. Enough to take everything Desmond had the same way his father had taken from Odessa's family and Walter's old clients and probably other people whose names I hadn't found yet. It would have been justice. It would have felt for about 5 minutes incredible. "I have a proposal," I said instead. Desmond looked up wary. "What kind of proposal?" "You're going to lose the land dispute either way," I said. "That part's already decided. But the district attorney investigation, the full weight of what your father did, that part isn't finished yet." "You could end me," he said flatly. "You know that." "I know." "So why haven't you?" I thought about Odessa, sitting alone in that farmhouse for 20 years, writing letters to a granddaughter who never wrote back because she never got the chance to. I thought about the version of justice that just meant more ruin, more debt, one more family broken apart the way his father had broken mine. "Because burying you doesn't bring my mother back," I said, "and it doesn't undo 20 years of my great-grandmother waiting for a letter that never came." "Then what do you want?" "There's a fund," I said, "for kids aging out of foster care. Kids like I was, no family, no safety net. No warning that the day they turn 18, the whole system just stops caring what happens to them next. I watched something shift in his face. You want me to pay into it. I want you to build it, I said, with your name attached, publicly, so every person in this county knows exactly what your family took and exactly what you're doing to make it right. He was quiet a long time. That's worse than prison, he said finally, almost a laugh except there was nothing funny in it. Maybe, I said, but it's the version where you actually get to do something with the rest of your life instead of just losing it. He looked at me like he was seeing something he hadn't expected to find in a 19-year-old girl who bought a condemned farmhouse for $7. Why would you offer me that? He said. Because someone should have offered my mother a way out. I said instead of a bus ticket and a threat, I'm not going to become the kind of person who only knows how to take things away from people. He didn't answer right away. But 3 weeks later, Walter called to tell me the paperwork had been filed. The Odessa Duskin Foundation, funded in full by a settlement from Desmond Kessler, publicly attached to his name, publicly attached to what his father had done. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something. It was the stone finally set down instead of carried forward into whatever came next. Spring came slow that year the way it does in Montana, like the season isn't sure yet if you've earned it. But it came. Snow melted in patches, revealing mud and dead grass, and the bones of what this farm might still become. I walked the property on the first warm day, really walked it, seeing it the way I hadn't let myself see it before, too busy surviving to actually look. 80 acres, more land than I'd ever imagined belonging to anyone, let alone me. Fields that had once grown wheat and oats and vegetables. A pasture that used to hold horses. An orchard of apple trees, most of them dead, but a few stubborn ones still pushing out leaves like they hadn't gotten the memo that they were supposed to give up. And the house. Our house. Still rough around every edge. Still patched in places that would need patching again next winter. But standing, we'd made it through. I stood in the middle of what used to be a garden and laughed out loud, the sound surprising even me. Anna came running to see what was funny. 5 years old, fearless, convinced I was the most interesting person she'd ever met in her short, storm-survived life. We made it, I told her. She didn't fully understand why that mattered. She was 5. She didn't know how many nights I'd lain awake, counting days, counting dollars, counting exactly how many chances I had left. But Renata understood. She came to stand beside me, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder. Now comes the hard part, she said. She wasn't wrong. Because rebuilding a house is one kind of hard. Rebuilding a life is another kind entirely. Caden came around more often after that. His shoulder mostly healed, though it still ached on the coldest mornings. He helped with the heavy work, the parts I still couldn't manage alone, and we fell into a rhythm that didn't need many words to function. One afternoon, he handed me a small wooden box. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside a sign, hand-carved. Letters burned into the wood with careful, patient precision. Duskin Farm, established 1958. "For the gate," he said. "Whenever you're ready to hang it." I looked at him. At the quiet steadiness that had been there since the very first day when he silently grabbed the other end of a tarp I couldn't lift alone. "Thank you," I said. He shrugged. "It's just wood." It wasn't just wood. We both knew that. Neither of us said it out loud. Some things don't need saying. By the second year, the farm had started opening its doors to others the way I'd always known, somewhere underneath everything else, that it eventually would. It started small. A woman from town whose husband had died, who couldn't afford rent on her own. She stayed 6 weeks until she found her footing. Then a family passing through, car broken down, no money for repairs. A month while Caden fixed their engine, and they helped us get the garden planted. Then more. A teenager aging out of the system the same way I had. A veteran who couldn't sleep indoors, but was willing to camp in the barn if it meant a hot meal and a warm fire nearby. We never turned anyone away. "Why do you do it?" Renata asked me once, the two of us sitting on the porch watching the sun drop behind the tree line. I thought about the bus station in Cheyenne, the frost in my eyelashes behind that laundromat, The years of moving because staying anywhere felt like asking for something I hadn't earned. Because somebody should have done it for me, I said. And nobody did. That doesn't mean I get to skip doing it for somebody else. Renata nodded slowly. She understood. We all understood by then in our own ways. They started calling it the lighthouse sometime in the second year. I didn't hear about it at first, but people in town had noticed the light I kept burning in the front window dusk until dawn every single night without fail. The way travelers passing through on the county road knew to look for it when they were lost, or cold, or just running out of places to try. That's the lighthouse, they'd say. You're almost there. I thought about putting up a proper sign with Duskin Farm printed clean and official the way Caden had carved it. In the end, I left it exactly as it was. The lighthouse was whatever people needed it to be. A place where the light stayed on. A place you could come in from the cold. A place where somebody would always answer the door. 3 years after I bought this farm for $7, I stood under the old oak tree Odessa had planted decades before I was ever born. Fall again. Leaves turning gold and rust dropping one at a time onto grass that had finally stopped fighting me. Behind me, the house stood solid. Roof intact, walls painted white, windows glowing warm against the coming dark. In the distance, I could hear Anna laughing as she chased chickens across the yard like it was the single greatest sport ever invented. Mateo was helping Renata in the garden gathering the last of the season's harvest before the first real frost came through. Caden's truck sat parked by the barn where he was working on something he still wouldn't let me see yet. As if he felt me watching, he stepped out of the barn doorway, saw me under the tree, raised a hand in greeting. I waved back. 3 years ago, he'd been a stranger who silently helped me load a tarp into a rusted truck bed. Now he was something else, something I still didn't have the exact right word for. He walked toward me slow and easy the way he did everything and stopped close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" "Everything." "Nothing." I paused. "You." He didn't say anything right away, but I saw the corner of his mouth curve just slightly the way it always did when he decided something without announcing it first. "Opal wants us over for dinner Sunday," he said. "Pot roast." "Us." That's what she said. I looked at him, at the way the autumn light caught in his dark hair, at the steadiness that had never once wavered, not from the very first day. "Okay," I said. I had family now. Not blood family, not in the way people usually mean it, but real family. The kind you choose. The kind that chooses you back. I pulled the last letter from my pocket, the one I'd never shown anyone else. The one I'd found tucked into the very back pages of Odessa's journal in an envelope marked simply for whoever finds this place. "My dear one," it read, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've come home. I don't know who you are. Maybe you're Marisol finally coming back after all these years. Maybe you're someone I never had the chance to meet at all. It doesn't matter. You're here now. You found this place, and that makes you family. This land has been ours for 100 years. It's seen hard winters and good ones. It's buried our dead and raised our children and held us when we had nowhere else in the world to go. It will hold you too. All I ask is this. Keep the light on. Not for yourself, for whoever comes after you, for whoever needs a place to rest, a moment of warmth, a reminder that they are not alone in this world. We're never really alone, not truly. The people who loved us leave pieces of themselves behind. In the land, in the walls, in the light that burns in a window on a cold night. They're still here, and now so are you. Welcome home, your grandmother Odessa." I folded the letter carefully, put it back in my pocket against my chest where it had lived for 3 years now. Then I looked up at the sky, at the clouds drifting slow overhead, at a line of geese heading south unbothered exactly on schedule, the way they'd done every fall for longer than any of us had been alive. "I'm home, Grandma," I said quietly, "and I'm not going anywhere." This is where my story ends, or maybe where it begins. I'm still not entirely sure which. 3 years ago, I bought 80 acres of broken dreams for $7. I was 19 years old. I had nothing and no one, and a photograph of a woman I couldn't quite remember. Today I have a farm, a family I built out of strangers who chose to stay, a purpose I didn't know I was looking for until I found it buried under a barn floor. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for where I started. I'm telling you because I want you to know something important. You are not too broken to be saved. You are not too lost to find your way home. You are not too old, too tired, too far gone, too alone. Somebody out there might be waiting for you right now. Maybe they've been looking for years the way Odessa looked for my mother. Maybe they've left a light burning in a window just in case you ever find your way there. Don't give up. Keep moving. Keep looking. Your lighthouse is out there somewhere. And when you find it, keep the light on for the next person who needs it too.